Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Arsalan Pareyal from Pakistan. Arsalan is a guitar player, rabab player, published ethnomusicologist, and music educator. Arsalan, you've been involved in formal music education both as a student and now as a music educator. In your experience, what role does music play in Pakistan's education system?
You have two institutions that provide formal music education. That's like you enroll into 3 year diploma program. That's one side of it. Like you actually practice, you learn to become a musician. And then there is music education in schools and universities and colleges. So my personal experience is in schools, like recently started in university, but mostly it was just schools and then, like these institutions who are like formally providing music education. Um, that 3 year diploma thing, it's one thing that is formalized, but it's not recognized by HEC. That's one of the problems that we are facing, right? Like, let's say if you've completed 3 years of a diploma and now you're looking for getting into a master's program or something, you can't. I mean, I remember I got into Berkeley, but then they asked me like I have to do my 4 years again because this 3 year diploma was not recognized. So this is how it is. Um, in the scene of music education in schools, that's where it gets very interesting because most of our musicians, specifically in Karachi, the day job they have, it's like teaching in school, and it's mostly just like keyboard with multi options, like you can have drums, chords, like one press and chords, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And mostly nursery rhymes, English nursery rhymes. And when it comes to role in terms of that, it's more of used as a token, just to show people that, oh, we teach music, but you don't have a proper curriculum that people follow. It's just like very vague. Students are not like as serious as they want. It's just like one activity that they have to do. But there are few schools that they have taken it seriously now. They're thinking, there should be some serious model that they have to follow in terms of curriculum, in terms of what the objective is when you talk about music education. What's the idea behind it? So these are the two dynamics that we have currently.
Yeah, you mentioned a keyboard where you can play nursery rhymes and drums.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
just to add to that, most music programs and
Hmm.
institutions will offer you both, say something like the sitar or tabla, but then also guitar and piano. Do you think that's important? And why do you think that is that there's an integrative curriculum offered everywhere?
If you talk about, let's say, for example, National Academy of Performing Arts or Arts Council of Pakistan, where you have like this formal education, you are exposed to Western theory, Western instrument, but you're also exposed to rag-based music and rag-based instruments, or South Asian classical instruments. The good thing is like when you have such exposure, it's easier to collaborate with other musicians, and you can, like have something which is rooted in the music that you've been listening to, and if you want to collaborate or if you want to do some fusion music or if you want to understand someone else's language, so it gives you, like Western music is like this global language everybody understands, so it just gives you this one edge. When it comes to school, you would hardly see anyone getting hired if you're a sitar player. There's only one um, instance where a sarangi player is hired in a school and they do it, but they're not even teaching that. They're just like there to help practice vocals. So that is there. So think of it this way, that we don't have any platforms where you can actually perform or get in part to. Like we don't have any orchestras. We don't have like national orchestras, or like even if you like, let's say if you're learning violin or if you're learning guitar or piano and everything, what would you do with it? Like there's no career pathway to it. Similarly, with when you are learning a tabla or you're learning sitar, it's basically the idea is to have something that is culturally rooted and culturally sustainable so that you're not feeling alienated with what your own music is. One of the interesting thing that I found while I was conducting interviews, and when I was teaching in schools, when you introduce, like so they're like usually they're exposed to solfege, so they're okay
Yeah.
with it. But the moment you introduce sargam, they
Hmm.
started making fun of it. They're like, okay, this sounds funny. It's the same thing, like it's just there to practice, but somehow it's like they're like, okay, what is this? So that alienation, it's there. So one of the things that we discussed in like is the one of the effects of post-colonialism that we have in here, that it speaks not just in terms of, so it it's like it's embedded not in just in students' life, it's embedded in educators, schools, and students. So like all of them together, they make this landscape of music education. Students are not exposed to South Asian classical music or ghazal gaiki or folk music. So when you bring it into the school, it's something really different to them. It feels like you're bringing someone else's culture into the classroom, you know. And then what happens is, let's say if you're a sitar player and like you have expertise in khayal gaiki, but because there are no job opportunities for a sitar player, you're more inclined towards learning keyboard so that you can get into schools. So what you do is you're compromising, and like you are negotiating with your own identity. So that's how it's affecting the teachers. And then when it comes to school, it's that, as I said, that it's mostly used as a token. So you like the school is like appreciating, even if someone is trying to, bring classical music or bring folk music to the classroom, the administration actually wants you to, like do more Western songs and stuff. It's tough to be a musician in Pakistan. And then you have this religious stigma as well. So that's how it is.
Arslan, you mentioned how institutions want a certain style to be taught. How do you balance your curriculum, knowing that okay, this there's a token version of music that's taught, then there's a very global aspect of music, but then there's also the local traditions. How are you balancing all of that?
One of the things, so because I was also not a trained music educator, I was basically experimenting with the ideas of how I can bring this music in an academic setting. Um, the school that was really open about this idea was Veritas Learning Circle, and I had so much fun working with them because they were open to ideas. Okay, what else can we do? And so what we will do is we will have like every month we will have a session, um, in a music classroom. We'll be introduced to different genres and different music from different parts of the world. So we would have a globe in the classroom, and we're like, oh, let's go to Australia and let's check out what their music is, and we will just like put some folk music, and that's sort of like develop the idea. Okay, music is something that every culture has, right? And then you sort of like associate that, okay, now let's talk about the music of us. Like what sort of music do we have? And it's sort of like develop a sense of ownership in the classroom. Like for example, when you're teaching Western notation system, you're teaching them takadimi, you're teaching them clapping. I remember I introduced them to some tabla bowls and how our rhythmic structures are, like developed, and how there are similarities. And then instead of working it around in English language, I asked them, okay, let's just count this rhythm in Urdu. And it felt so good in the classroom that my entire class neglected practicing Takadimi system in English. They were like, okay, let's do our own tabla bowls. The thing is, like, you just need to bring it down to their level so they understand. And one of the things that was basically the ownership, that this is ours, this is our thing. Like it was, um, like the origins is in this region. So there's this sense of ownership. So that worked. And then what I would do is I would expose them to different maestros. Like I remember. So what I would do is like there's this class I can never forget them. This is grade 5A, I remember. So their class was after every break time. So what I will do is in the break time, I will have the projector on and I will just like put some music. So when they will enter in the classroom, there's always some music. So like they all when they enter, they're just like looking at the screen and there's this silence and this curiosity, what's going on? And I remember one day I was playing this Kavali by Farid Abu Ayaz, a Coke Studio version, and it was just like one of the most interesting class I had that day. They were like, "Sir, how can he sing while eating a pan?" And they would just like notice such small things. Then you're like, "Oh my God, okay, now we can have a discussion." And like they would say, "Okay, what's the clap cycle?" They would constantly think of it. Like they're like, "Oh, they're clapping, but we cannot follow the cycle. Can you tell us what's going on?" So that was one thing of just like exposing them, and let them just like breathe. I still remember it the other day I was playing this one recording that I love. It's Raag Khamaj by Ustad Vilayat Ali Khan Sahab. That's like one of my top recording. And I remember I was playing it, and the students and they were like, "Oh, this is so peaceful. Oh, this is so calming." And I remember the next day, one of the students actually asked me, "Can you play that recording again?" And I'm like, "There you go."
Arslan, my final question for you. If you had to make three changes to Pakistan's music education system, what three changes would you implement?
There are three ways that I see it, right? One is that you need to have a culturally rooted curriculum, first of all, right? A culturally sustained curriculum. That would, my idea is not to completely banish Western theory or Western instrument, but my idea is to have a balanced understanding. And I guess this is basically inspired by the curriculum from Napa because you were exposed to both the things. So I was comfortable talking to an ustad and learning about rag and tals, but I was also, like comfortable decoding a jazz standard, So that was the horizon, that was the landscape, that I would have. So yeah, a curriculum, a culturally based curriculum. The second thing is like you need to have um, a a teacher training program, where you understand how would you be training your faculty to teach music in school. Currently, this is what it is. You get a diploma from Napa, or you can the school hire you on the basis of can you play national anthem on the keyboard. That's what they're into. So you can play that in the assembly. That's the criteria. If you can do it, you're on. And if you can be a panto. So like you need to have like a trained teacher program, where you're teaching these faculty or how to develop curriculums or how to develop lesson plans or how to approach students from different grade and how to have a trajectory that they would be following. So that's the thing. The third thing, you need to have a dialogue between the school administration and so here's also a thing, like you have this hierarchy culture in Karachi as well. Like if let's say if a school which is like you know, standard wise, one of the elite schools in Karachi, and they started doing something, it becomes a trend, and then the other schools are following. So there needs to be some dialogue between them, like so that they can initiate this idea that okay, yeah, we need, like so most of the curriculums you have in schools is like IGCSE curriculum or IPE or Cambridge, right? And they're heavily westernized, so I mean there needs to be some understanding that okay, you need to preserve your own culture and all your own music,
Yeah,
and that would just like bring these three things together, and they would like you will start to see changes happening in like a couple of years. Yeah.
great. Thank you so much, Arsalan.